So Blackmagic just announced that they are coming out with the Ursa Mini Pro 12K cinema camera for $10,000. And here's why I think that you should not buy that camera. In fact, you should not upgrade your camera until you have upgraded these at least 5 other things that I'm going to mention that you should upgrade before you upgrade your camera body. Okay, so I'm taking into account that you're actually kind of working solo as a DP, as a director, as a filmmaker, and I'm just gonna, for this case alone, I'm gonna leave out audio gear, assuming that you got someone else who's dealing with the audio gear. But if you haven't upgraded your audio gear and you're trying to do audio by yourself, this is absolutely gonna be one of the things that you need to address before addressing your camera body update. But here are the 5 things that you should have before you even consider buying a new camera body. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna talk about is lenses. It's the one that everybody talks about and everybody knows, and it's really important to get the right lenses and get good lenses and invest in good glass, because it tends to last longer and it tends to hold its value so much better than camera bodies. And it can be a little bit tricky because ultimately you're kind of making a guess about which lens system you're gonna go with. I mean, my very first DSLR in 2012 was, I actually went with the Sony. I went with the mirrorless, the translucent mirror actually, and they were actually Sony A-mount. And unfortunately, I made a pretty good guess going with Sony rather than, at that point, it was really Canon or it was really Nikon. But I went with Sony, and it turned out that the A-mount got abandoned and they went right on to the E-mount years later. And so I didn't invest a ton in the glass, but I did make a guess for it. And I bought a bunch of nice prime lenses all in the Sony A-mount, and I actually still have them because I couldn't really figure out selling them that would be worth it for not hanging on to them for, you know, in case I want to buy an A-mount camera again. But you're gonna want to pick which mount you're gonna want to go with, because you know, if you already have some glass, and if you have about $1,000 or more of glass, then I think it's probably that you've probably made your decision. And if not, maybe you've got one piece of glass, but you really want to invest into what mount you're gonna go with. I actually kind of, like I said, I started with the A mount and then I went over to the Nikon because I thought Nikon would be very flexible, even though I really wasn't even using Nikon cameras. And to tell the truth, I ended up flipping all the way over to the Canon EF mount, which I've been with EF mount for probably about 6 years now, and I've been happy. And ultimately, I've gone with the Blackmagic production camera, which happened to be EF mount, and then I also have the Blackmagic production 4K camera, which of course is a micro four thirds, but you can do the speed booster route, which I actually think is a better route for the micro four thirds camera anyway. So Canon EF is the one that maybe I would recommend, but if you've already made your choices on that, if you've already kind of gone to the E mount, you know, that's still a good place to go. But picking your mount, it's one of those things that you go for it and you hope, but seriously, in the end, you're going to be able to sell most lenses so much more than you'll be able to sell camera bodies. So invest in glass. With all that being said, I think the first thing that you absolutely should have is that you should have at least one of these. This is a 50mm prime lens. So if you bought the kit lens and you're rocking the kit lens, this is going to be a huge upgrade to any kit lens, because it has, this one goes for about $100. It's the Canon version, and it's a 1.8 aperture, so it's pretty fast and it gets relatively nice shallow depth of field. And on a 50mm, whether this is full frame or whether it's a crop sensor, you get a really nice picture, and it's very good for close-ups, very good for in video land. It's very good for close-ups. It's also good for photography as well if you're doing the double system. But you definitely want at least one of these 50mm lens. If you want to go with the more expensive one, actually I think this is the more expensive one. This is the 1.4, which is a little bit better, but the 1.8 is also really good. But you're going to definitely want to get some prime lenses. And in order of the prime lenses, I would say go with a nice portrait prime, which you can get for $150, $200, the 50mm. And then secondarily, if you're really going the video route, and this might be the first for the video route, is the Sigma 18-35. It's like you could shoot a whole movie with that lens without even worrying about it. It is a fantastic lens. It's wide enough on different sensors. It still works really well. I have it right now. I'm actually looking at it right now. This is 18mm on the Blackmagic Pocket with a kind of with not Metabone speed booster, but the other speed booster, and this works really, really well. And I can zoom in on this thing, and you go ahead and you get really nice punch-in zooms off of that thing, and that's, you know, it's got a two times zoom effect on it, so that's really, really nice. And then you're going to go with a more telephoto lens, so you could either go to the 85 millimeter or the 100 millimeter, or you switch over to the big boy, which this is an amazing lens. I actually got this used, because this is the first generation Canon zoom lens 70 to 200. I think I probably got this for around $700. Which is a really good price for a zoom lens like this. It's not as good, it's not as quite as sharp as the new version. I think there's a 3 version now, but this is a really quality lens. I shot a feature film on this, or with this as well, and oftentimes I was doing multicam, and I would have one camera set up with maybe like kind of a more standard field of view, and then with this, with a zoom, it always kind of gave that extra element. It's a really kind of like cheat way of getting some production value, because a really nice close-up, and it's got pretty good depth of field off of it. This older lens does flare like super weird, which is kind of cool, and you can usually justify why it's doing that, but it's a little bit of an older piece of glass. But you know, definitely getting one of these things if you can afford. I mean, once again, if you can afford the new one of this, that's going to hold its value pretty well. I always do recommend going used, because you've already had someone has already kind of bought and done the main loss of it. So I could probably turn around and sell this for $700 or whatever I bought it for, which is really nice. So it just makes you feel like you're able to use the gear. It's kind of like a rental without losing too much. Whereas this gear, you know, if you do that with a camera body, then you're gonna lose. You're losing. That's a really good argument for renting camera bodies rather than buying camera bodies, because, you know, the loss factor is really, really high on camera bodies. And then I think the final thing I would recommend is an 11 to 16, the ultra wide. They have some fisheye lenses that are wider than that, but getting a super wide angle lens is really quite fun to play with. And I think that's those are really, that kind of gives you everything that you really need to do. And there can always be specialty lens that you can rent, but man, if you got a prime lens, you got an 18 to 35, which is the best freaking thing. It's like a prime lens with a 2 times zoom, and then a 70 to 200, or just a single prime lens. Like I actually happened to, I wish I almost didn't do this, but I happened to buy an 85 millimeter prime, which works really well for photography. But you know, I also, between the 70 to 200, I usually use the 70 to 200, because that having that flexibility of changing your field of view a little bit is really helpful. Even though this is nice and light, and you could probably do it on a gimbal, so there's other uses for it, but you never really regret buying good glass. You just kind of hang on to it, and then you find its use for it. Okay, so secondarily, the second thing that you really should have before you upgrade your camera body is you need to buy yourself like a quality light. So for a long time, I had used, you know, different kind of more DIY lights, which I'm doing a video showing you the best way to make a DIY light, and that's certainly a good option. But if you're really dealing with, like, if you're dealing with potentially more pro clients, and you kind of want a light that really intimidates them a little bit more, you're probably going to want to step up to a more of a pro light. And right now it's a real sweet spot in the technology, because you can get like a ton of light in the LED world for pretty cheap. And so I'm definitely going to recommend that you upgrade and you get yourself you know, a bigger LED light that has a lot of power to it. And with that, you can do a ton of flexibility. You can bounce the light, you can put a softbox on it, you can dome it, you can do kind of like a lantern, you know, and you can get, you know, you can move it around, and they're small enough. They work off of V-mount batteries, or they're charged, and so really flexible. Really puts you in the position where you've got you can show up to a shoot not having seen the space too much, and you know that you've got the tools that work for that. So you know, the aperture is a really good way to go. But Adorama makes this Klar light, which is kind of like I guess it's kind of like a knockoff of the aperture lights, but this is the slightly smaller version. This is actually a bicolor light, and so I have 2 of them. I have the 120, and I also have the big brother, which I think is the 300. It's the most like the Aperture 300D, but this right here, it's You know, this is actually a Fresnel lens that goes on top of it. So you got a 2-time Fresnel lens, and it's not, I wouldn't say that it's like an amazing like focused beam, but it's enough to kind of give you some level of hard light on that. And then this right here, the best part of it is it doesn't have a huge amount of output, but it's bicolor. And having bicolor, I find just endlessly useful, that you don't have to worry about gels, you don't have to worry about you know, like rigging up stuff in different color temperatures. And I love to use color temperature for creative purposes. And so having the bicolor, to be honest, with the feature that I shot last year, I ended up using this more often than the 300. I put the 300 outside and I was able to kind of imitate daylight to some degree with the 300, but the 120 was always there. We had this going everywhere. We had it on a single V-mount battery, which had burned through, you know, pretty quickly, and depending on how big the level was. But man, the bicolor on this was really beautiful, really high CRI rating. So I would definitely recommend going and kind of upgrading your light systems, you know. And the last video, I recommend some light panels, and light panels are definitely an awesome way to go, but you don't get that much output out of these things. These are really, you know, light panels like this, you know, you can, this is the G.A.S S series, and you can, you know, you can get a decent output out of them, but it's really a lot closer for filling in what is already there. You can't really go to a space, and if it doesn't have any other light going on, you know, you can't, with that light like that, you can't change the lighting of the room. And so that's really, you know, ideally we talk about we'd like to light the room, not the face. And so if you're going to light the room, you need a much bigger light. You need some bigger lights, and this is really, these LED panels are much more for lighting the face and not the room. So you can cheat, you can do some close-ups. They're very, very useful for that sort of situation. But you know, in a wider shot, you're just not going to be able to pull it out. Okay, so now 3, this is a super unsexy one, but if you don't have this going, then you will not have any video production going on at all. And this is that you need to invest, you need to upgrade your hard drives before you upgrade your camera body. And especially if you're even thinking of going to one of the RAW formats, or to even the ProRes, if you've been shooting on a more compressed codec like H.2.6.4 or H.2.6.5, and you're gonna go to ProRes or RAW, which I think is a great thing to do when you do upgrade, but you're gonna need hard drives. And so there's another video I'm gonna be linking to, which is going to be covering how to RAID hard drives and how to set up hard drives for your video purposes. But essentially, I'm gonna recommend that you get some, like, lots of blank hard drives. These are internal hard drives, and then you can get a dock like this, which is a USB 3 dock. It's got its own power supply, and you can dock like a little hard drive like this. This is essentially a 2 gig Seagate, and it docks right into a dock like this. And there you go. Now you're up and running. You got a hard drive, and then you can store these in these little anti-magnet bags, and you can back up your footage. And so if you take one of these, and then you get, you know, they have docks that have 2 of these, you can RAID them together for speed. But you're going to want to upgrade. You're definitely going to want to upgrade your hard drives if you're even thinking about upgrading your camera body. Number 4, same thing, along with the same thing that we've been talking about, the hard drives, you're gonna wanna make sure that if you're upgrading, if you're thinking about going to 12K, you better have a computer that is ready for that. I mean, there's nothing would be sadder than to buy a camera that you can't even edit the footage off of, or it ruins your entire workflow. So once again, make sure that your camera is, your computer is completely ready for that. And I'd say be patient on that, because you can easily buy a camera that just blows your computer out of the water, and then you're constantly in this, like, this upgrade everything type of thing, and you never really feel settled with the gear that you have. And once you get that, you feel really comfortable. You feel like you're at a place where you understand your gear, you're not struggling with gear, you're not in this learning curve of learning new gear, and you're really getting comfortable with it. So once again, make sure that your computer is upgraded enough, that it's got enough RAM. Once again, it's the hard drives, that those got to be fast hard drives. and you know, that your video memory is up to date, because a lot of these new softwares, they're using VRAM, and if you're you know, if you're undersized on those things, then it's just gonna suck. It's gonna ruin your workflow. And at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do is to make more content, make more videos, make more films, and you wanna find the gear that really helps you do that with the best results possible. Okay, and the last thing that you could consider upgrading before you upgrade your camera body, that is gonna be either a tripod, a slider, or a gimbal. And that's right, I'm covering basically any of those things that if you don't have like a pretty decent tripod, don't even consider getting a new camera. You need a decent tripod just to get going, that you can set up, you can feel comfortable, you can get some nice fluid shots with that. I mean, that's just kind of a basic. You could get around it if you're a gimbal person and all you want is moving shots, then you could make an argument why you don't have the tripod. And then the slider, I think a gimbal can kind of cheat over a slider, but really having some sort of really solid stabilization that you've picked which way you're going to really do that. And you know, different causes for different things, but either you got a nice shoulder rig that you've really rigged up your camera and it fits really comfortable and you like that handheld feel, or you've got a solid tripod, or basically all of those things. So I'm really saying that it's at the bottom of the list, that upgrading your camera. You know, it's very hard to have all of these other things completely ready. You should almost have been, you know, really settled with your workflow to the point where you got the lenses, you got everything else, and then the new camera comes along and it happens to fit you, the mount that you can get, and you can easily transfer over. It's a wonderful place to be when it's an easy transition into a new camera body, and it's not just starting all over again and you've got to buy, you know, the mounts for that and the rig for that. You really don't want to do that. It just ends up making video miserable and you're just living in gear hell. So anyway, that's it for today. I really hope that I'm helping you guys. I know that that it took me a while to figure this out myself, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And so I'm just trying to put this out there that hopefully it can help other filmmakers as they're going along and they're kind of like going through some of the things of figuring out the gear stuff and figuring out what to buy next and what's important and what's not important. So I really hope this helps you. And let me know if you guys have any questions, or if you have comments, or if you just think I'm wrong and you want to fight. Let's just fight on the comments there. Anyway, I'm coming with some more videos really soon, and I'll talk to you guys later.